A book which made a strong impression on me as a teenager was the novel Empty World by John Christopher, the science fiction author best known today for The Tripods, a trilogy which was turned into a trippy, unsettling 1980s TV series by the BBC. Empty World is one of his minor works, but what fascinated me about it was the way it invokes the depressing loneliness of its protagonist, Neil Miller, one of the few survivors of a plague which wipes out all but a tiny fraction of the human race. In the course of his journey through a post-apocalyptic England, Neil does encounter a few other survivors, but what made the strongest impression on me was the way the novel describes the utter isolation Neil faces, knowing that he is literally the only living human for miles around, the empty world of the title. Imagine your hometown or city, or even a small village, completely denuded of people. No traffic on the roads, no bustle in the street, no banter in the corner shop. Just silence. Nothing. Emptiness. The apocalypse was a real and frightening prospect to teenagers of my generation, growing up at the tail end of the Cold War. To this day, late at night, when I hear planes pass overhead, part of my brain worries, what if it's an ICBM? What if the birds are flying? Until fairly recently, I took some solace in the thought that at least modern kids won't have to face that worry, but well, obviously, there were many things to fear about total atomic annihilation. The heat so intense it would reduce your body to an ashen shadow, the horrors of radiation sickness, the breakdown of civilization causing riots, violence, no legislative leviathan restraining the Hobbesian war of all against all. But the most unsettling thing for me was always the emptiness. The empty world is a trope which recurs again and again in depictions of the post-apocalyptic landscape. In Shelley's Ozymandias, the traveller from an antique land regales the narrator with his depiction of a landscape in which nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. Gustave Doré's illustration, The New Zealander, depicts the lone figure of his title fulfilling the British historian Macaulay's prediction of a future in which some traveller from New Zealand shall, in the midst of a vast solitude, take his stand on a broken arch of London Bridge to sketch the ruins of St. Paul's. Similarly, in the remarkable Dead London chapter of H.G. Wells's War of the Worlds, Wells's narrator is overcome by the emptiness of London following the Martian invasion. Why was I wandering alone in this city of the dead? Why was I alone when all London was lying in state and in its black shroud? I felt intolerably lonely. As I crossed the bridge, the sound of "Ulla, ulla, ulla, ulla" ceased. It was, as it were, cut off. The silence came like a thunderclap. The dusky houses about me stood faint and tall and dim. The trees towards the park were growing black. All about me the red weed clambered among the ruins, writhing to get above me in the dimness. Night, the mother of fear and mystery, was coming upon me. But while that voice sounded, the solitude, the desolation, had been endurable. By virtue of it, London had still seemed alive, and the sense of life about me had upheld me. Then suddenly a change, the passing of something, I knew not what, and then a stillness that could be felt. Nothing but this gaunt quiet. What all these depictions of the post-apocalypse have in common, the aesthetic which unites these images of lone travellers gazing on the ruins of civilization, is what the 18th century philosopher Edmund Burke called the sublime, which he defined in the following terms. No passion so effectually robs the mind of all its powers of acting and reasoning as terror, and whatever is terrible with regard to sight is sublime. The sublime differs from the conventionally beautiful because it overawes us. It intimidates us. Romantic writers and artists of the 18th and 19th centuries found the sublime in mountains, valleys, depictions of apocalypse and its aftermath, and lone heroic figures depicted contemplating these heights, depths, and enormities. The first time a video game astonished me in my adult life, the first time the interplay of pixels excited in me something comparable to Burke's notion of the sublime, was when I happened upon the glowing sea while playing Fallout 4. I spent my first playthrough of that game meandering and only sporadically taking part in the main storyline quests, so I missed the explanation which would have prepared me somewhat for the shock of crossing a ridge and finding myself in a shattered, radiation-blasted hell where demonic creatures reared against the lightning-riven miasma of the sky. Through a combination of game mechanics, for obvious reasons the glowing sea is the area on the Commonwealth map in which the player sustains the most intense radiation damage, and sheer aesthetic, it terrified me. I loved it. It was, indeed, sublime. I wonder, however, how sublime I might have found it if I were not wandering through the landscape as alone as Macaulay's New Zealander, but was instead marching jauntily through it in the company of my online buddies. Is the world of the post-apocalypse still a sublime experience when it feels less like a solitary encounter with an awe-inspiring panorama of terror, and more like a cheeky deathclaw stake with the lads? A lot of discussion about the online multiplayer setting of the forthcoming Fallout 76 has centered on the issue of preventing players from antagonizing or griefing each other, or how the quest structure will function in a world without any human NPCs. But a more subtle issue is the way in which the game transforms what is a solitary experience into a social one, and whether or not that fundamentally changes the dynamic of the game. Sure, anyone who's looked at my Facebook feed, or indeed some of the other videos on this channel, will know I'm not averse to using the share button when playing Fallout 4, but the promotional video for Fallout 76 features a gang of power-armoured players taking a collective selfie alongside the body of a mutated animal they've killed, like a bunch of trophy-hunting bros. I'm pretty sure I'm not the only Fallout player who saw that footage and wondered what on earth Bethesda are playing at. There are things I am excited about in Fallout 76. A bigger map to explore is always a good thing, the new power armor paint jobs look sweet, and I'm psyched for some of the new monsters, particularly Mothman as a massive weirdness buff. But as much as there is to look forward to, I still worry that the switch from a solitary gameplay model to a more social one may ruin one of the things I loved most about Fallout 4. It seems clear at this point that Fallout 76 will be a very different experience, but, and I hope I'm wrong about this, but we'll see, whatever that experience is, it is unlikely to be a sublime one. Hi everyone, so thank you for watching what is a bit of a departure for this channel, in that it's less of a poetry related project than just me wittering on about video games. Obviously, you know, do all the usual things that you're expected to do in these situations, or that we're expected to ask you to do, like share, subscribe, etc, 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 all that sort of thing. You know what this sounds like because you've seen loads of other people do videos like this. Most of the videos are still going to be related to poetry stuff, and particularly to the Struggle Play project I'm working on at the moment. The next video that I'm going to be doing, the next longish video, I should say, I probably will put up some shorter single poem videos as I continue experimenting with editing software and stuff like that. But the next longish video I'm going to be doing here will probably be a piece about Theo Ehret, the photographer whose work I've drawn on in a lot of the visual stuff that goes with the Struggle Play films, and particularly the idea of how Ehret's work brings up interesting questions about mimesis and respectability and authenticity in the context of of sports photography and what is essentially a burlesque of sports photography, I suppose, in Ehret's various pieces. So that is going to be quite an interesting one to work on, so check that out when it comes out. And as I say, there'll be more sort of individual poem videos going up. Any comments you have to make on this video, or indeed on any of the other ones, would be very gratefully received, and so forth. As always, thank you for your time, and yeah, thank you for your time. Cheers, bye.